Hey, what's up, everybody? I told you on the last video that I was gonna try to get more out there, and I was so excited. I was like, man, let me get right into it, right? So before I start, two things. If you have any questions or like any cool things you could think of once you watch the video of like what you would like to see me do with the data for Yu-Gi-Oh, especially for Go format, please let me know in the comments, and then I can try to do that for you. And then second, at the very end, once I go through all of the data, I'll switch over to Excel. And if you've ever been curious on like how to find out the probability of like drawing a certain card, given you have X amount of cards in your deck and you never know how to do it, I'll show you a simple and easy way in Excel that you can do it yourself, right? Let's get right into it. All right, so format championship number 33, format league championship number 33. It was 105 duelists, 7 rounds of Swiss, cut the top 16. With that, I went through and through Java, and I got 239 replay URLs, which gave me 171,000 observations or actions, right? So anything that happened in the game was recorded as an action or an observation or a row, and then it gave me 171,000 of those, and it included up to 74 variables in that data frame, right? All right, so right into it. Let's go. Monster attributes drawn by duelists. So subsetting the data, right? That was 5,405 monsters drawn in Format League Championship 33. Out of that, 2,588 were dark monsters, accounting for 48%. And then we had light monsters coming in at second at 27%. And then every other attribute that was drawn only accounted for 25%. So 50% were dark, the other 25% or so were light, and then the remainder only accounted for 25%, right? So we're pretty heavy on dark and light, and mainly dark. Getting to monster types drawn, you can see here it's heavily skewed again to two things, and that's spellcaster and warrior. Accounting for 65% of all monster types drawn was spellcaster, and then warriors the other 21%. And if you look, every other type only accounted for 14% of the monster types drawn. So once again, we have a heavy skew on the types. And I put Ryu Koki up there because, looking at the percentage, right? So 86% of all monster types drawn were warrior and spellcaster. Ryu Koki seems even better for you zombie players out there. All right, so we got monsters levels drawn, right? So for monster levels drawn, on the left it describes, hey, if you drew a monster, given it was level 1, 548 of those monsters were drawn. And then the big number here is level 4. So level 4 accounted for 52% of all monsters drawn at 2,812, right? Because if you remember from earlier, there was 5,405 monsters drawn total. And then for average attack and defense, out of all these monsters drawn, the average attack was 1,600 and the average defense was 1,200. What I find really interesting is that in order to be into the 75th percentile of defense, you would have had to draw a monster that was 1,600 and above. And to be in the 75th percentile of attack, you would have to be in 1,800 and above. What this means is it's easier to draw a monster with higher attack than it is to draw a defense monster with higher attack, right? But when you start looking at the data and you say, okay, well, what about if I look at all level 4 monsters drawn, right? Because they don't require any tribute, whereas any monster level 5 and higher requires some type of tribute, usually some type of summon requirement, right? So then I said, okay, let me look at all level 4s that I could just slap on the field, right? Because I'm really trying to compare to GK Spy. And the average attack of a level 4 drawn was only 1,500. So the reason why something like GK Spy or even DD Warrior Leader, right, with a 1,600 defense, it's hard to get over sometimes is because a normal summoned level 4 on average doesn't have enough attack to even get over it, right? So in this tournament, right, comparing this tournament, because I can't compare it to anything else at the moment, right, because it's going to take time to gather more data on other tournaments, but we can say in this tournament that drawing a high defense monster was at a premium. And then the last thing on this slide we'll talk about is, 24% of all monsters drawn were flip effects, And I think that's going to kind of come in later when we start talking about most drawn cards in this tournament, which is right here, right? So we look at 12,612 cards were drawn, right, in this entire tournament out of 105 duelists. Out of those drawn cards, 453 of those cards were knock, 384 were GK Spy, and then 418 were Trap Dushu. Least drawn cards. So I actually had to look up Trap of Border Racer. I'm sorry. I am a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, but I actually had not seen that card, and I was like, man, what is this? But in this format, in this tournament, these cards were only drawn once. It doesn't mean they were played or activated, and I have another slide for that, and we'll talk over it. But yes, these cards were all drawn one time. Somebody was obviously trying to run some Benkai. I think you'll see later they had the flip effect card as well. And then fun facts, right? So I kind of want to throw like, hey, like what's some fun stuff or something that's not really exactly, you know, like data for the sake of learning. But shout out to JCVD 93. He has first place for the most amount of times shuffling his hand. So there was 2 or 3 duelists in the running. But he took the crown at 404 times shuffled throughout this event. When it comes to life points, right? So 6,448,938 life points were sacrificed to the Shadow Realm, and only 780,190 were actually gained, right? So from your upstarts. But as you can see, 6.4 million were given. And then Master of Oz, right? So I was looking, and this guy right here in this tournament, he was actually special summoned in attack 13 times. All right, so let's start getting into most normal summon monsters. So out of 3,140 normal summons in FLC 33, 378 of those were Breaker the Magical Warrior, 258 were Tribe, and then 260 were Tsukiyama. This is when I started kind of asking questions, right, into the data, and I kind of wanted to find out what the answers were. I was curious. And once again, if you can think of something else cool that you kind of always wanted to know, if I can make it happen, I definitely will. But for Breaker, I wanted to know every single time Breaker was normal summoned and he gained counter, or didn't gain counter, but he was normal summoned, how many times was Ring of Destruction activated on his summons, right? So I had to do a little coding for that and kind of sub data down and kind of get exactly what I want to see, and to make sure I was merging the data by ID and time, right? All that stuff to make sure I actually had the correct matches. And anyway, so we found that 37% of the time that Breaker was normal summoned, Ring of Destruction was activated on Breaker. So I thought it was pretty cool. Next for Tribe, I was like, okay, what's something cool I can ask about this? Out of 1,357 declarations of a monster effect, 11% of those were actually from Tribe. So Tribe counts for 11% of all monster effect activations, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then getting to Tsukiyama. So it's not really crazy to say, okay, there was 2,735 times a monster was banished from the graveyard. So the Tsukiyama, she only counted for 2.5% of all banishes. But what's really interesting is given that the Tsukiyama was put in the graveyard, right, which was 122 times, 68 times that it was in the graveyard, it was banished. So 56% of the time that it was given in the graveyard, it got banished. I mean, I don't want to, I try to think like an economist and not give causality to things. But I would like to think the reason why I always banish the Tsukiyama when it's in the grave is it can't be special summoned, right? So it makes sense that, yes, it doesn't account for a lot of banishes in total, but given that it's in the graveyard and it's an option to banish when you need a dark, 56% of the time that it's in there, in this tournament, it was banished. All right, lonely normal summons. So you may have noticed from earlier from least drawn cards, Spell Canceller and Time Wizard are batting 100, right? So they were drawn once and actually normal summoned once. So that's pretty cool. All the rest, right? They only seen the field one time be a normal summon. I know all about Protector the Sanctuary. My man Apop and a Slifer got me good. He had Stumbling with Protector, which then puts it in defense, and then he flipped Morphing Jar, and I had like 4 in my hand, and it was maximum pain, right? So I had to discard 4, couldn't draw anything. He gets to reload his whole hand, so it's pretty painful. The reasons why I have Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar to the right. Not to really tell you, I don't ever really want to get too deep into like the coding side, the data side. I mean, I can make separate videos if you're interested, right? And you kind of want to know like the behind the scenes things, but I don't really want to turn these into like super in-depth, right, confusing type videos. But when I first was subsetting the data, Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar showed that they were normal summon one time. And I was like, man, that's odd. Like, who in their right mind is just normal summoning these jars, right? But good thing, understanding your data, understanding Yu-Gi-Oh! I was like, let me go look at exact times these things were normal summoned. And what I found out is they were the trap dust shoot, right? So it was someone activates trap dust shoot, and then they pick the jar, and then they normal summoned it to show that they're putting it back in their deck, right? So I think it's just important to say, like, quality of data is just as important as like getting you an answer, right? Like we can look at data and kind of just throw it out there, but we have to make sure it's clean and like we're giving true facts of it. And understanding Yu-Gi-Oh! And being able to catch that was really important for me to tell you that these were the only monsters that were normal summoned once. Whereas if I just would have thrown the normal summons in there, both the jars would show that they were normal summoned once, which isn't true, right? They just got normal summoned via the trap dust shoot, but not actually in play. All right, special summoned addicts. So out of all the special summons, we got Chaos Sorcerer coming in at first. He was special summoned 198 times in attack and 74 times in defense. And 63% of the time that this card was summoned, special summoned, it was put in attack. And then BLS was summoned in special summoned the most, coming in second, 179 attack, 41 defense. But for BLS, 77% of the time, it was special summoned in attack versus defense. And then Break Your Spy, right? It was special summoned in a defense 160 times and special summoned in attack 75 times. And 63% of the time, it was special summoned in defense. So that's your top 3 special summon cards in this tournament. And then shout out to HMVB and Wes. They hold the title for the most BLS summons in this tournament, coming in at 9. At the bottom, we got dice, right? So dice were rolled 255 times in this tournament, and this is pretty standard independent event probability. It's roughly, if you did this for infinity, every dice number would pop up roughly 15% of the time, and right here it's kind of around that. And I want to shout out Morphador. So I was like, man, let me look at this and see who had to show their hand the most via Trap Dust Shoot. And given that he actually only played 5 matches and the other closest 6 duelists played 7 matches, they had to show their hand 9 times. And that's me accounting for any other showing, right? So I went through and made sure I got rid of all the times that a duelist showed their hand just because like it was the end of the game or they were just showing for whatever reason. I made sure to see that Trap Dust Shoot was either flipped or activated, and then I merged the data to show me every time that same person showed their hand, and then I did the count and the total from there. But yeah, he actually they only played 5 matches compared to the closest 6 duelists, like I said, that played 7 and still showed their hand the most at 9. So RIP Trap Dust Shoot, man. Free info all day. And right here, I think this is the most important part of all the stats I found for this at this time, right? There's plenty of more I can do with this data. This is just some of the things I wanted to look at, some of the things I wanted to get out. I mean, we could do a part 2. We get some questions and I can kind of go back into the data and find those for you. But the impact of winning or losing rock, paper, scissors. So on the left, it just shows, hey, out of all the times RPS was done, it was roughly like 240 something times that it was 239 times, and then roughly 33% of the time, either rock, papers, or scissors was chosen. And then out of that, though, if we look to the right, we find that given that you won rock, paper, scissors, you are 48 percentage points least likely to lose. So that means that you are almost 50 percentage points more likely to win, right? Given that you won RPS, which is crazy. So if we talk about any card that is busted, it's actually RPS, right? And then I kind of want to show you how I got the data, right? If you understand either A, how coding or stats or regressions work, I assigned a 1 to every single time someone won RPS in a column, right? So we see AGT VLS, he won RPS, and then he also admitted defeat one time for in this, and just this quick screenshot. So there's another 1 right there because he won. It's a continuous 1 every single time. And every single time that person admitted defeat is another column, which is also given a 1. And then we regress X on Y, and then that gives us the probability, right? And yeah, it's crazy to see how much RPS does for your probability of losing or winning. So that's pretty crazy. And then in the middle, so I won't call out the 3 duelists, right? That's unfair, and I never really want to put out in the world or the internet like people's actual choosings. I kind of want to be partial to it. But 3 duelists, 67% of the time and above, chose the same rock, paper, or scissor. And I kind of put that out there as a warning, right? Like, don't be predictable. For the most part, on average, duelists were switching up their rock, paper, scissors. And I kind of put an example what it looks like, how the table would look in the code. So I got my buddy GMYFS, and I blanked it out so you couldn't see what they chose. But essentially, every single time you chose rock, paper, or scissors, it's recorded. And then we make a table showing how many times you selected it and what you selected. And then from there, we can see every single duelist, their username, and what they selected. So just don't be predictable. If RPS is already going to hurt you, I guess you could say, in your chance or your odds of winning. And if you have smart opponents who are watching VOD or a lot of replay, and you're constantly choosing the same RPS, they're going to pick up on that, and then that's going to kind of put you off on the wrong foot. So this is the portion where we talk about Excel. So I think it's really a really simple function, and that's why I kind of want to show it to you, because I was in Discord the other day, and someone was asking, hey, like, I'm thinking about putting 2 of these cards in my deck. What's the probability that if I go first that I actually draw it? And I think it's, like I said, it's really simple. So in this instance, we have Trap Dust Shoot. Say we're thinking about putting Trap Dust Shoot in our deck, and we're thinking about putting 3. And we want another probability, given that we go first, what's the odds that we draw 1, we draw 2, or we draw 3 of that? So if we hit enter and we type in height, right, we get a function called heightgeom.dis, hit tab. From here, you can highlight heightgeom.dis and click, and it'll give us a little help function. So that way, if you kind of forget, like what goes where, this will kind of help you follow along. So first, it's asking how big is our sample size. So the number of successes in the sample. So in this instance, 1, right? What's the odds that we draw 1, given that the size of the sample was 6 because we went first? The population size, so the number of successes in the entire population. Remember, we said, hey, we want to put 3 Trap Dust Shoots, so we put 3. And then the number of population is the size of our deck. So if you're running a 40 card deck, you'd put 40. And then from there, you type false because you want a probability mass function. And we hit enter. So what this is telling us that if we put 3 Trap Dust Shoots in our deck, we go first, what's the probability of only drawing 1 of those? And that's 34.1%. They can highlight the bottom right here, drag that down, right? Make it fast. And now we just come up here and we say, okay, now what if we draw 2? And what if we draw what if we draw 1, and then what if we draw 3? So it's saying that if we put 3 Trap Dust Shoots in our deck, the probability of drawing 2 of those in our opening hand would be 5%, and then drawing all 3 would be 0.2%. So it's never 0, but it's definitely there. And then, so this would be go first, right? So okay, now say we're thinking about, man, we're gonna cut one of those trap dust shoots, and we still want to go first, but now we're thinking about only putting 2 in our deck, right? So we could highlight, right, drag that right over here, make it easier on yourself. But the only thing we have to change now is, so we still want another probability of drawing 1. We're still going first, so we're drawing 6 cards. But now it's the number of successes in the population. We've cut that from 3 to 2, and that gives us a different probability, right? So now, if we only put 2 trap dust shoots in our deck, we'll only see that roughly 26% of the time in our opening hand. And then we drag that down, and then we change this 1 to 2. And that says, hey, go first. We have 2 trap dust shoots in our deck. What's the odds that we draw 2 of them? It's only 2%. And obviously we can't do 3 because there's only 2 in the deck. So you can't draw 3. It's not possible. Yeah, so once again, if you're building decks and you kind of want to know probability for yourself, this is a simple, easy way to do it. Instead of having to do it by hand, or if you've never done it before, hopefully this helps. If you'd like to see something like this else, or any other way I can kind of show you via Excel or coding for probabilities, I'm okay with doing that too. Thanks for watching, guys.